All we need is a little understanding. Walk a mile in their shoes. And if we keep our hearts open-minded, we'll enjoy this wild ride called life. And if we keep our hearts open-minded, we'll enjoy this wild ride called life.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the True Sweet Hide podcast. I really appreciate all of you guys for hanging in there with me, and also to listen to all these amazing guests. And today I have someone on here that is he's inspirational on all the struggles he's been through, and for him to be on this platform to share with us is admirable, and I want you guys to really tune in on this. JD McCabe, he grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as the middle child of a very large family. And from an early age, he was independent and a practical realist. This first-time author began writing his diary as a historical journal of events that evolved quickly and came without context. Danny was encouraged to share this personal and unbelievable voyage in rediscovering himself by the many people who witnessed and heard about his journey firsthand. He is blessed with two beautiful adult children. So, JD, thank you so much for being on here. I was reading your story, and all I have to say is wow. But I am truly grateful that you're on here to be able to share this, because I know you're going to help so many people with it. But could you tell us, let's begin from when you were a child and you started writing and just going through childhood. How did that go for you?
Childhood, well, first of all, Annette, thank you for the opportunity. And I think that the title of your podcast is absolutely perfect, the True Sweet Hide. But to answer your question back to my childhood, yeah, I'm the middle child of number 5 out of 9. Irish Catholic upbringing, never a dull moment amongst the siblings, and had a very, very happy childhood. And, both of my parents are now deceased. Unfortunately, I lost my father in the middle of, my personal marital nightmare. And then this past March, just prior to the COVID shutdown, we buried my mother. Both of them, were lost due to dementia. But they were wonderful, selfless parents, and I couldn't have asked for anything better from an upbringing perspective.
I'm very sorry to hear about your parents, but
thank you.
But to have such an amazing family like that, wow, that is a blessing for sure.
Yeah, there were 6 boys and 3 girls.
Oh my!
Yeah. And now we have upwards, I've lost track, but I think 28 grandchildren and a busload of nieces and nephews. And again, very blessed to be surrounded by such wonderful people.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. So going into your adult years, and you met your wife. How did you meet your wife?
I met her playing, I was playing in a slow pitch rec softball league. And, at the time that I met her, I was not in a relationship with anybody. I wasn't really looking for anybody, quite frankly. I was enjoying my time with the boys and playing softball and drinking an occasional beer every now and then, and just, beginning to start my professional career, and life was good. Met her playing slow pitch softball.
That's really cute.
Yeah.
So what were you doing? What was your profession in?
I was at the time, and I still am in the industry, but I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and now I'm still in the pharmaceutical industry, working as a national account director for another organization. So
nice. So tell us a little bit about, you got married, and honeymoon stage, everything's so blissful.
Yes, yes, yes. And of all days, right? Of all days, we got married September 11th, 1993.
Wow.
So yeah, I got married in Pittsburgh, and fast forward 17 years, our marriage was, and I'm certain now, looking back, perhaps I missed something, but our marriage is very good. We very rarely fought. We had a very stable marriage. We had a very happy marriage. We were blessed with two beautiful children. My son Billy arrived in 1995, and then Katie. Billy's the first gift. Katie's the second gift. Katie arrived in 1998. And we were blessed to be able to move from Pennsylvania to Louisville, Kentucky, and ultimately to North Carolina. But the first 17 years were very stable, very happy. And I think as the wheels started to come off in the marriage, I know my daughter Katie said it best. She sat in her closet crying, asking me, she said, "Dad, you and Mom were like teenagers in love. What happened?" And sadly, at that point, Annette, I had no answer to that question. And so it was in 2010, 17 years in, that the wheels started to come off a little bit. Erin, my now ex-wife, would subtly begin to accuse me of infidelity. Not to put it in business terms, but she seemed to do it quarterly. She would come into my office. If I wasn't traveling, I worked from home, but she would come into the office and demand to see emails and demand to see my phone. And, because her therapist at the time suggested she had the right to see that stuff. And I provided it to her. I had nothing to hide, but she was beginning to lay the groundwork that, I was out cheating on her, which in fact was not the case. So that started subtly in 2010. And then in the spring of 2014 is when, holy hell broke loose within our marriage. The accusations of infidelity, then she would pivot to accusations of drug abuse. So as it would turn out, everything that she was accusing me of doing, she was actually doing. So those were the truths. Those were the truths that she was hiding from me. So she not only began those accusations, but in the spring of 2014, she also started turning our daughter against me. She was 15 at the time, very vulnerable, very, impressionable. And so with time, she came to believe that her father had a drug addiction. Her father, had anger issues. And, she was essentially estranged from me for a couple of years. Fortunately, she's, back in my life now, and things are wonderful. But it was also in the spring of 2014, which I think is important to know, that I started to exercise. Under the inspiration of my son, Billy, I started to exercise a little bit. I wasn't doing anything too strenuous, but in a matter of 6 weeks, I lost 35 pounds, unexplained. Ultimately, I would, within the next couple of years, I would discover the reason behind that. But I started to lose weight. I used to go 230, 235, and I started to lose a lot of weight, got down to 190, and then the weight continued to fall off. So I ultimately sought counsel of our family practitioner, because I lost about 50 pounds, 50 to 55 pounds in less than 2 months. Ultimately, once we separated and things really got bad, I lost about 100 pounds. So, from a medical perspective, I had things checked out, and they found that there were abnormal white blood cell counts. There were another enzyme called creatine phosphokinase, which is an enzyme that is irregular or elevated when you have a heart attack, or you have a traumatic brain injury, or you have a muscle crushing injury. And I had not experienced any of those, but they were significantly elevated, along with liver enzymes. So it was in that further enhanced her belief, and probably the belief with my daughter and with my now ex-mother-in-law, that he's doing something. There's something going on with him. He's lost a tremendous amount of weight, and that further solidified their accusations around drug abuse, around infidelity, and just made her story stronger. And then, so it was really the spring of 2014 that and I had no explanation for why all of a sudden things were falling apart. But essentially, essentially she was gaslighting me to the point where you learn to believe that you're the problem in the marriage. There was no trust in our marriage because of a couple of lies that I had early on in the marriage. And I talk about those in the book. I'm very open and honest with my side of things in the book, but it was nothing to the point where I destroyed the foundation of our marriage. But I held that belief because she was very good at convincing me that it was me that was causing all the issues in our marriage, and we never had trust, and there's something going on. And the biggest mistake that I made, and this is part of the reason why I wrote the book, this is part of the reason why I'm so grateful to you and to the others that have provided, mediums for me to talk about it, is I came from a large family, as I told you about initially with our introduction, and then I told nobody. I told nobody about what was going on in the marriage. I kept moving forward with my professional life. I kept it all to myself, and that damn near cost me my life by keeping it all pent up and not letting folks know what was going on. So it was a spring, or not the spring of 2014, but the summer of 2014 on a beach trip with my two kids, with Aaron, my mother-in-law, her son and his wife and their two kids. It's out of the blue, my mother-in-law threatened to kill me. So I came up from the beach. Aaron and her mom, Doris, were standing at the long end of a granite counter, and her mother just looked me dead in the eye and said, if you put your hands on my daughter, I will kill you. Perhaps you're addicted to porn. Perhaps you're addicted to drugs. There's something deeper going on. Maybe there was something that happened in your childhood. And I was just utterly shocked, too utterly shocked to really even address her absurd accusation. So whatever her daughter was telling her, was driving home, was strengthening whatever led her to attack me like that on a beach trip. So, that was in June of 2014. Things continued to spiral out of control. I continued to lose weight. I continued to believe that I was the reason for the demise of our marriage. And it was in the spring, not the spring of 2014, but the fall of 2014, September. I was a broken man. I was hollowed out. I was beginning to believe that all of the physical things that I was dealing with, I was beginning to believe that maybe that's contributing to my mood issues. And I started to believe that I was the issue, and I started to pray for something physically being wrong with me to provide answers to what was going on. But in September of 2014, I was involuntarily committed. I spent 9 days between two different psychiatric facilities. I was misdiagnosed with bipolar 2. And I would later come to find out that she set me up with all of this. She was brilliant. She was writing letters to my family practitioner, to my psychiatrist, behind my back. And I wouldn't discover that until down the road, until a lot of our legal issues happened. But she was brilliant, wickedly evil, as they would say. So I spent 9 days in psychiatric lockup. I got out September 24th, almost 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago. And the abuse continued. But I would describe it as it was abuse to the point where, I don't know if you've ever read the book, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. But I read that book, and it's essentially when you're living with somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, that they continue to pull you back in just to continue to abuse you. So we would, on occasion, still be intimate. She would tell me that she loved me. She would tell me that, we're going to work on the marriage, and I would believe it, only to have further emotional abuse and further things continue within the marriage. The way I equate it to is, I guess, an abused woman staying in a relationship or staying in a marriage because she ultimately believes that, yeah, this was my fault. I did this. That's where I was at. Even when I came out of the psychiatric facility, I was doing everything I could to hang on to my family. I love my family, and that was my strength. And as I've come to learn, the devil often attacks your strength and turns it into a weakness. So I was doing everything I could to hold together our family unit. But ultimately, I stayed in a marriage for 7 months. I endured not only abuse from her, but from my now ex-mother-in-law. And I ultimately couple of my brothers and the rest of my family got involved in September of 2014 after I was, committed to a psychiatric facility. They made a trip to town to figure out what the hell is going on. And, my family and the one, my family and my friends and my faith is what got me this. So I thought I hit rock bottom when I was in the psychiatric facility. But little did I know that the bottom was nowhere in sight.
Oh my God.
So, that's essentially when things, like I said, started to fall apart, was in 2014.
Was there anything, was she ever diagnosed with anything? Did you ever find out why she did what she did?
Well, it was only through a lot of discovery, which I talk about in the book, through our alimony trial and domestic violence charges. And I took full advantage of the concept of public record, that transcripts from all of our legal proceedings are in the book. There are letters in the book. There are text messages between each other in the book. And it's very, very real. My therapist believes, and I believe, and others that got pulled into our 4-year nightmare, almost 5-year nightmare, believe that she's got narcissistic personality disorder, amongst other things.
Right.
The other thing that I believe she has, and the professionals do as well, is formerly known as Munchausen's. She's got factitious disorder. So early on in our marriage, she started to have, or I believe she started to have, some health issues in her own right. And she believed she had an autoimmune fibromyalgia type condition. And I was there by her side. I was with her as we saw specialist after specialist after specialist, only to come to find out after we separated and ultimately moved throughout our divorce proceedings that she in fact does not have any type of autoimmune disease. It's all in her head. So we went to specialist after specialist after specialist, and ultimately, once we subpoenaed her medical records and really dug into the medical records, we had some pretty esteemed institutions that she went to that said, no, she has no autoimmune disease, that it's essentially all in her head. So, the title of the book is The Third Gift, and the third gift was a revelation she made to me during one of our mediations in July of 2015. Not to give away the book too much, but it truly was a gift from God, because when that card was played, when the revelation was made, I'm sitting in one condo type unit with my attorney. She's in another one with her attorney, and you've got another attorney going back and forth, and the entire time the legal meter is running, right? But the mediator, after they made their first offer to us, a settlement offer, said, oh, by the way, she wanted me to let you know you gave her this. And she dropped a particular test on the table. And it was then that I realized, okay, everything that she's ever accused me of doing, she's actually done. Okay. So the cheating, the infidelity, that was all on her. So for me, it's a good Lord above kind of, first of all, smacking me in the face saying, son, your marriage is over. Because as I went into that mediation, my dumb self was still in love with her. And I was still hoping to, separate for a while, continue to maybe go to counseling therapy and keep our family unit together. But, the guy upstairs had other plans and provided me emotional freedom, emotional justice to finally realize, okay, you didn't do this. And once that revelation was made, given the line of work that I'm in, I'm fairly knowledgeable about how to interpret a medical claim. I spent hours and hours and hours looking at 5 years of medical claims, 5 years of pharmacy claims, and I only discovered all the additional truths she was hiding from me. So she was the one with the drug addiction. Pills, prescription pills, lawfully prescribed, as her attorney would say. They were lawfully prescribed. Well, for 2 years, she used our kids to fill amphetamines in their names to the tune of 600 days worth. And so I was able to piece together 90 to 95% of everything that she was doing behind my back. And literally, if I were to describe our marriage in one word, it would be backward. that, again, everything she accused me of doing, she was doing. So that piece of it just enabled me to begin to reestablish who I was as a man, who I was as a father. Certainly the husband component was gone, but I was able to begin, and I'm still struggling with it today, to reground myself in who I am and what my true identity is. Because when you're led to believe that you're less than a man, that you're dishonest, that you're, I had every vile word thrown at me from her and her mother. I was called every name in the book, and there was no truth to it. So, so they believe, without question, they believe, and she's never been officially diagnosed, because the beauty of narcissistic personality, and I use beauty in quotations because it's quite ugly, is that you're able to convince and manipulate everybody in your path. And she manipulated her therapist, and her therapist believed that I was the one with the issues, and her therapist testified twice against me.
Oh my God.
Her therapist testified against me at our domestic violence trial, which once I was removed from the house, she had filed in the state of North Carolina. It's a non-pleading state, so you can say whatever you want. You can file whatever you want. You'll get your day in court. So she filed some trumped up charges against me with respect to domestic violence, and dragged our daughter into court to potentially testify against me. Fortunately, she was removed from the courtroom because she's a minor and she never testified against me. But again, that was at the point where she was not in my life. But her therapist testified twice against me, believed that I was putting cameras in the doorbells, hiding in the crawl space underneath the house, hacking routers, hacking her credit. Everything. That I was this master hacker, that I was messing with her life from a distance. And her mother would also come to believe that. And there was no proof to it whatsoever. But what drove that was not only her narcissistic personality disorder, but also the paranoia that comes along with the abuse of amphetamines. So, her paranoia and her delusions were off the charts. So, I was not concerned when she filed domestic violence charges against me, because I did nothing wrong. I hadn't seen her in 5 months at that point. I wasn't concerned until my domestic violence attorney said to me, well, the only problem is she can call the cops at any time and tell them you've been at the house, and they have no choice but to arrest you.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, then my nerves kicked in, because I'm like, she'll do that because she's already accused me of being at the home when I wasn't at the home. It's laughable now, but I listened to over 17 hours of audio recordings where she would call our home security system. She would call our cable system and have lengthy conversations with these folks about cameras on the side of the house, hacking routers, cutting phone lines, cutting power to the house. And it was heartbreaking. I would laugh at times. I would cry at times. I would be a little bit angry at times. I'd be fearful at times, because in a couple of the recordings, she talked about learning how to use a gun. And I thought, dear Lord, don't let her get a gun, because she is so paranoid and she's so delusional. God only knows what she would do with that. But, all of that information and a small sample of the recordings are in the book as well, because all of that was public record. All of that was turned over as we went through our 4-day alimony trial. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because the system failed both of us. The legal system, the mental health system. I was the one that was involuntarily committed, yet she's the one that actually needs mental health treatment. And she had therapists, she had attorneys along the way that recognized that she's got some major issues, but nobody did anything about it. Nobody had the courage to seek to get her help. She was so troubled that her first 2 attorneys kicked her to the curb after 20 months of representing her. Finally realized, I think, by listening to the same tapes I listened to, that, wow, her paranoia is just, we can't even deal with her as a client anymore. So she would bounce on to the next attorney, and, there's always another attorney waiting to pick up a check somewhere. So yeah, I mean, that's in it in a nutshell, is that we had a very happy and stable marriage. And I do talk about in the book too, what my theory is as to why she went off the deep end. And I think it's related to her childhood, quite frankly, and to the death of her father in 2007, when she had to make the decision, the tragic decision to take him off life support. He had a massive heart attack. He was a relatively young man. As it turns out, to give you a little backdrop, which I talk about in the book, in her childhood, her father came out of the closet, as her father turned out to be gay and left the family when Aaron was 2. And so I believe that abandonment contributed to, and my therapist believes it, contributed to her narcissistic personality disorder, contributed to just all the issues that she dealt with. And to this day, I don't believe she's getting any help. I've had no contact with her, and sadly, our 2 young adult children now are estranged from her. I mean, have limited contact with her. So there's no anger, there's no hatred. It's more empathy. It's more sadness that people didn't recognize this and get her the help that she needed. Right. But her underlying mental illness was only exacerbated by the multiple number of prescription drugs she was taking, in addition to, I believe, perhaps illicit drugs. Because again, she accused me of doing that. And I can smile about it now, but she would accuse me of going to gas stations to buy drugs and to hook up with people. And so I don't know if in fact that's what she was doing, but there was plenty in her medical records and medical claims to point to the fact that she had been less than faithful in our marriage. And again, I lay all that out, and I didn't figure out all of it. Don't know who they were, how many, because she destroyed her phone. She destroyed computers. As we moved towards, our alimony trial, we were under court order to maintain the integrity of those devices. And she went ahead and restored them to factory settings and had assistance in wiping her computers clean. So we never could discover who it was, but I do know, based on DNA evidence, I do know based on medical evidence that she picked up something outside of our marriage that fortunately I don't have. And that is the third gift. And that's the third gift. The first 2 gifts are the kids. The third gift really is the revelation. The third gift is clarity and peace of mind to know, okay, you weren't perfect. You weren't a perfect husband, but you certainly didn't do all these things that you were accused of doing, which of course I knew. But I was able to reestablish a little bit of my identity. So
I really love that. I was thinking about the title when I was writing it down. I was like, you know what? I wonder what the third gift was. I kind of pieced together that the first 2 were the children, which is amazing. So the whole book title it draws you in, and I'm sure that it wasn't a very easy one to put together. But how did you? I think you talked about this a little bit earlier. How are you coming back from all of this? How did you gain the strength to put this in a book to share it? Because, it is all personal details of your life. And so that's a hard one, especially with the kids now. So how did you gain the strength to do that?
Well, I mean, there was a ton of encouragement along the way, and I'll provide you some additional context. When I got out of a psychiatric facility after I had been diagnosed with bipolar 2. And by the way, I've been cleared of that. And I haven't seen a psychiatrist since October of 2015. And he essentially apologized and suggested that perhaps he thought I was agitated and irritated. And there are many components to bipolar 2. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, yes, I was agitated and irritated. I had a little bit going on. But ultimately, my brother Al and his lovely wife Jane, they along with the rest of my family, but those 2 were my anchor throughout all of this. They were there for me 24/7. He was there for me throughout all of the legal proceedings. They would make trips from from Pennsylvania down to North Carolina whenever I needed. They were available 24/7 to me. I didn't initially take all of his advice, but when I got out of the psychiatric facility, and he knew me, and he knew that something was seriously wrong and going on in my marriage, and neither one of us could figure it out. But he said to me, "You've had the cops called on you. You've been diagnosed with bipolar 2. You need to start documenting this stuff to protect yourself." So it wasn't until February of 2015 that I started to in the middle of an ice storm. We had an argument at home. She accused me of doing something that I said, you know what, I'm just going to go take a ride. I grabbed my computer, sat in the parking lot of a movie theater in the middle of an ice storm, beginning to document all of this. And ultimately, when we got up to our alimony trial, I had 70 pages, 8.5 by 11, single space, of all of this already documented, all the events that took place. And so that was the foundation for the book. After I came home that evening, being gone 3.5 hours and typing feverishly on my little Lenovo ThinkPad, I come back into the house and she accuses me of drinking. So she's like, you smell like a brewery. Did you have a couple of beers? And it's like, no, I had a Coke and I had a bottle of water. So that's how it would go. It was, I love you, I want to work on this, to crazy accusations. But I was encouraged by all the folks that experienced this along the way to write this. Like, you absolutely have to write a book. There's so many twists, there's so many turns, you need to write a book. And my therapist at the time, quite frankly, said there's just not enough books out there about men on the other side of the equation. Yep. And I want to be clear that this is not a male versus female thing. This is not a Me Too versus Men Too thing, because they're all equal opportunity offenders. And I've heard from many females that have written the book that they've also been in very abusive relationships. But I was encouraged by my therapist to say, look, you need to tell the story. And of course, the attorneys at the time were pretty excited about it and said, we've never had a client that is book worthy, so we'd like to ask you to write a book. So that was the encouragement from a lot of folks. It was a ton of work, as you know, as you're working on your own book. But it was cathartic to be able to put it all down and to piece it together. But as I've mentioned to you at the outset, I'm doing my own social media, so it's caused me to kind of reopen a lot of the boxes that I've compartmentalized and tucked away. And as I'm putting snippets of the book out on Facebook and out on Instagram, I have what I call many holy shit moments where I go, wow, holy shit, I forgot she even did that to me. Yeah, that's right. That took place. Yeah, she did say that. So that's caused me to get back into therapy to help deal with, some of the flashbacks and some of the little bit of the post-traumatic stress that I'm dealing with. But, in general, I'm good. But the strength came from the encouragement of others and the twists and the turns and what have you. So, yeah, I'm glad I did it. I don't know that I'd write another one, but it was very, very cathartic for me. And my kids, they're adults now, young adults, and they've both written it or read it. And their comment to me was, we had no idea you were going through all of this, Dad. So, yeah.
Oh my God. How has your faith been? Because I know you mentioned a few times that, you were raised, in a Catholic home, but I'm sure, were there times in your life where you were questioning why? Is there a God? And I'm just, because I did that in my life.
I would say, I don't know why I put 2 weeks on it, but I would say I did it for 2 weeks. I questioned him for 2 weeks, going, why? Yeah. But then ultimately I quickly got to the point where I said, let your will be done. Yeah. And I put it in his hands, and my faith became stronger. It was very good, but it became stronger. Mm-hmm. And my kids too, and I'm proud of my kids for their faith and the choices that they've made, because they had every right to make all sorts of bad choices, but neither one of them did. And I'm extremely proud of them for that, for their faith and for the choices that they've made. But it became stronger, and I would spend many nights. So I lived, prior to us realizing prior to me figuring out what was really going on, prior to the third gift, as I had mentioned, was that I was still in love with her. So I was living, they were in the home. I had been manipulated out of the house. I talk about that in the book. I was living out of my car. I was living out of a hotel in addition to traveling for work. So that was for 3.5 months. So I would spend a lot of time on weekends and whatever, just sitting in a quiet church, just kind of trying to clear my head and just trying to process all that was going on. So it was one grenade after another that would come over the wall. So after I'd been out of the house, it was domestic violence charges to civil summons to all sorts of crazy accusations that I was dealing with. And I had to lean on my faith and leaned on my family and leaned on friends and reconnected with a lot of old friends and made new friends. So there were a lot of blessings that came along the way. And he absolutely walked with me and put many people in my life to walk with me. And so I wouldn't be here today without my faith. You know, when I talk about in the book that I was pushed to the edge, I was pushed to the edge. And I will leave it at that, there were many, many, many dark nights that I thought it might be easier to just end it.
Right.
And so, yeah, she pushed me to the brink. But it was my kids and my family and friends that I thought about, and my faith that enabled me to remain strong. And so the one thing you do realize, as you know from your own personal story, you find strength where you think it didn't exist, right? And when you can't walk, you crawl. You do whatever you can to just keep moving. And ironically, my professional employer never knew any of this.
Wow.
And I was promoted into the position I have today 2 months after I came out of psychiatric lockup.
Wow.
And she even tried to derail that. I mean, I was in California for business, and I was going to have my third and final interview. She knew when it was. She called me a half hour before it and said, I think we need to separate. So we would go back and forth. Yeah, we're going to separate. We're not going to separate. I mean, we ping pong back and forth again. I hate you. Don't leave me. But yeah, that was a half hour before my third and final interview. And I remember telling her, you know, I have an interview in a half hour, but yet you're going to drop this on me right now. And yeah, so, I mean, I can smile about it today, but.
Well, I am so glad that you're still here, because
Yes.
you know, dark moments, sometimes you can never get out of them, but your faith and your family and the people that were behind you, thank God. You know, it is amazing how God puts people in your life right when you didn't even, you know, you didn't expect it, or just you have no idea who's there until they're there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
And the one thing I wanted to add is many people that have read the book, and I'm very grateful to those that have already purchased it and read it, and the tremendous feedback that has come in, and from folks that have said, you know, I feel better about myself. I know I'm not alone. I went through a similar situation. So saying thanks and being grateful is simply not enough, but I'm deeply appreciative to those who have read it. But many of them have sent questions to me saying, why did you hang in there so long? After you got out of psychiatric lockup, why did you stay in the marriage for 7 months after that? And I never had an answer. And I still don't. But the only answer that I have is because God wanted me to. Because had I left in October or November of 2014 and said, look, I need to get out of this, or I need to remove myself from the situation, that third gift may never have been revealed.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been. And I was in Tennessee on a business trip, and that is to kind of reinforce the fact that there were little signs along the way. I was in Tennessee, and I talk about it in the book, but I was in Tennessee on a business trip with a colleague. He picked me up at the hotel. I was in the middle of my mess. And on his dashboard was taped, God is after something. Let nobody judge you or define you but God. That was June 15th of 2015. Yeah. And I had been removed from my house for about a month. I'd been living out of a hotel for about a month at that point. And boy, that hit me like, wow. And so for me, it would be literally 3 weeks later that the third gift would be revealed. That she would play the card that she played that would ultimately set me free, at least emotionally, to the point where I realized, okay, I get it now. I get it. Everything you accused me of doing, you were doing. So, but people ask, why did you hang around? And I didn't know. I was trying to hold on to my family unit, and again, so that the answers that the good Lord has provided on His time they were life-saving answers for sure.
And it's incredible. Those signs, we don't see them, we ignore them, we bypass them, whatever the case is. But it's amazing to receive those signs, and you had no idea you needed.
Yeah. So I saw those signs I saw those signs very clearly, but there were signs in our marriage, and even going back to our dating years that I missed, the red flags, as people call them, right?
Yeah.
There were many that I missed that I should have investigated further. So turns out, which I knew when I started dating her, that she had been married before. And I knew that. She had been married briefly for 8 weeks, according to her. Well, I know she was married to a gentleman who was 11 years her senior and so forth, so on. And she would claim to me that she was looking for a father figure, but I should have investigated that one a lot further. But then again, there's no regrets. I've got no regrets whatsoever. I've got 2 beautiful children out of it. And, I will say she was a good wife and was a good mother, and I will stand by that for 17 years. Yeah. And she simply lost her way for whatever reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing this. And, like you said, there's other people who need to read it to feel like they're not alone either, and that they can make it through. And, I love that you state that you hope to encourage people going through similar situations to believe in themselves and be their own advocates. And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely so
important. You absolutely have to. So whether you're dealing with a legal system, a medical system, a mental health system, or what, you've got to be knowledgeable and you've got to be your own advocate, because the systems are broken. Right. She was able to navigate a medical system where she could bounce from specialist to specialist, from hospital to hospital, and self-report all that she had. And they would take her at her word. Yeah. And she was ultimately able to find a psychiatrist who testified at our trial, and her testimony's in the book, who would write her whatever she wanted. Whatever medications she wanted, Erin would request them, and she would fulfill that request based on her self-reporting of what her other therapists and her physicians had told her. Took it at face value. And so she was able to navigate a broken medical system, and here we are. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing this and for writing this and for still being here. I know that it needed to be told, and I'm so glad that people encourage you to do that. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and again, I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity. The one thing I want to leave you with, though, too, is one of the things that kept me going throughout my challenges and struggles is what I call relativity, and your own personal story drove that home for me as well. Is just when you think things are bad in your life, others have far worse going on. And so when I was living out of the hotel and got to know folks at the hotel, and throughout my journeys for the last 4, 5, 6 years, you talk to people and everybody's got a story. And as they share their stories, you go, you know what? I don't have it so bad. And that's one of the things I told my kids as they moved through they endured this through their high school and college years, unfortunately. And Katie's now a senior in college, and my son Billy is established professionally, and they're both doing extremely well. But as we were going through this nightmare, that's what I told them. I said, as bad as you think it is, others have it far worse. And that kept me grounded and continues to keep me grounded today. So count your blessings. Sometimes we say that, count your blessings, and sometimes they're empty words, as your parents would tell you back in the day, count your blessings. And you'd be, yeah, right. I'll count my blessings. But when you absolutely have to put your head in your hands and count your blessings, it works.
Yeah.
It does work for sure. So I'm grateful to you for this opportunity and I thank you for sharing your platform, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So where can people find you to get your
Yeah, so it's available through the book is available through Mascot Books. There's a hardcover, there's an ebook. It's also available through Amazon, Target, Walmart, eBay, pretty much every one of your outlets. I have an Instagram, The Third Gift, and Facebook page, also titled The Third Gift. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I haven't mastered Twitter yet, and I probably still haven't mastered Instagram either, but I'm doing my own social media work. So, the book's available everywhere, and it's been out since March, and so far it's doing okay.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. I will definitely put all this stuff in the show notes and in the podcast guide. So if you guys aren't following that, please do. And again, I thank you for your strength and your courage and your bravery for all of this. And thank God that you're still here.
Thank you, Annette. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thank you for listening to the Truth We Hide podcast, created and founded by your host, Annette, the founder of A Wild Ride Call Life. Also, a big thank you to all of our sponsors for each and every episode that is aired. We have so much support from them and all of our listeners. You can find more information at www.awildridecalllife.com.